What's up, you creepy fucks, and welcome to the Let's Talk Horror Channel podcast. And welcome to the Creep Zone, where we have very honest, unrated, unfiltered conversations about something from the world of horror. On this episode, probably quite a few people might be going, yeah, but you're talking about horror. This isn't really horror. It is a horror. It's a horror adjacent movie, and that is something that you are going to get a lot coming for the show. Last month as well, you got an episode that's all about Overlord. If you've seen that movie, you've listened to that or watched that episode, thank you, obviously. But that one is what I would consider a horror adjacent movie. Cloverfield is something that I also consider to be a horror adjacent movie because it has action. It has bloody everything in this sort of movie, and it's still somehow a big Hollywood blockbuster movie. In the format that it is, and we're going to talk about everything. But Cloverfield is a proper interesting movie. It's one that I have wanted to cover on the show for a long time. So when my guest had that on his list, I was like, do you know what? It makes sense to do it. And like I said, coming for quite a lot of this year, this is the sort of movies that you're going to get. Not like handheld or anything, but I'm basically doing whatever the fuck I want. It is what it is. And my guests and I are basically deciding on movies that they are what they are, as long as they have at least something to do with horror. I mean, this is still Let's Talk Horror. It always will be. I'm the one that mugged myself over. I could have done it where I did like Let's Talk Movies, and I could have done any fucking movie, but I'm an idiot and I just chose horror. But that's where my heart is, and that's what I love. And that's, yeah, exactly. Yeah, it could be. But that's that's where my heart is. Horror is my genre, and that's what I love. So it's still going to be horror. You just have to roll with it. But whatever I do talk about is going to be great. But like I said, we're here today. We're going to be talking about Cloverfield, and my guest. Now, I said this before we came on, but my guest, Paul. Hello.
Hello.
But basically, we spoke a little bit because I didn't realise until today that the last time he was on my show, we did the Blair Witch Project, which is obviously most commonly known as one of basically the first handheld horror that was put into, and the ultimate final footage movie that was put into the mainstream. And I didn't realise until today that we're talking about Cloverfield, which is another one of the biggest handheld found footage movies. So that's exciting. It's nice to have you back. So, Paul, thank you for coming back on the show.
Thank you for inviting me. And it's like I say, I know you've had my illustrious co-host Sammy on. So I wanted to. Well, I was on audio last time, so now you can see me in Technicolor as if we were back in the land of Oz. Yeah, I just wanted to, I didn't want to interrupt, but I wanted to touch on a point that you made there about like horror being so subjective. I think there's a lot of people that like to put horror in one kind of box when the horror palette is so wide and variety. Like anything can be classed as a horror if you it depends how you take it. Now, it might sound a bit facetious here. You can go as like say Roald Dahl's Witches is a very scary movie. It's a kids film.
Terrifying.
It still can be classed as a horror. On the other type of thing, you could even say Hocus Pocus in a way is about witches. It's got a zombie in. So could that be, even though it's like comedy horror, that could fall into that kind of brackets. So I never like when people say, "Oh, you can't class that as a movie," because we all know, like say the Academy Awards tried to do that bullshit with Silence of the Lambs many years ago and said it's not a horror, it's a thriller. I'm sorry, but Hannibal Lecter is one of the scariest monsters in horror ever made, and like say they can do one for trying that. But yeah, I'm very much like say like to be very open minded with like say the classifications of horror. If you find something scary, that can be classed as a horror movie in my eyes. So yes,
absolutely. Yeah, no, you're absolutely right, and that's why this year it is all about talking about movies, and there are definitely ones later on that people are going to be wondering whether it's something that you can consider horror. But it's all about themes, it's all about ideas, it's all about stories, it's all about concept. It doesn't have to be ghosts, ghouls, guts, gore and goblins. It doesn't have to just be that to be horror. It can be something that unsettles you in ways that you never thought it would, and has to
Mm.
have no intestines or heads falling off or anything like that. And that's what's so great about this genre, is that
Yeah.
it is so open. It isn't generalized. It is just anything that it is, or any
Mm.
movie that you watch. There are if it has themes of horror in it, if it makes you feel a certain way, you can, if you want to, believe and consider it to be a horror movie, and you
Mm.
won't be wrong, because you can't be wrong, because horror movies, life is subjective. Think what you
Mm.
fucking want, it is. So yeah, I completely agree with you. That's why for me Cloverfield is a very good example, where it is
Mm.
essentially a mixture of everything, and people from who enjoy different types of genres can still come to this movie. If you like action, it's got all that.
Mm.
If
Yeah.
you like special effects and
Mm.
sci-fi, well, this has it. Horror, it has it. So that's why I'm really excited about talking about Cloverfield. But as I did
Mm.
mention, Paul is from the nerdy up north. He's the creator of it all. With he's got a lot of fantastic co-hosts as well. Like you mentioned, Sammy was on my episode when we did The Omen.
Mm.
She probably got very very annoyed with me with doing The Omen, but I'm sure she, I'm sure she was fine. Yeah, at the end of it.
If she like Sammy never gets annoyed, but yeah, I know Sammy. The Omen's one of her favorite films of all time. She was very excited to discuss and have a conversation with her, because, like I say, that's all this is. It's about conversations, having, like I say, different opinions and enjoying having them conversations. But yeah, it's Cloverfield's such an interesting film, and it was quite a fun one as well, because normally when I do review movies, it's normally movies my wife has no interest in watching, and my wife is one of the biggest kaiju fans. Like, if there's a giant monster, she loved Pacific Rim, she loves King Kong, she loves anything with a giant monster. We'll talk about the king of the monsters a little bit later, but yeah, so she was all excited so that we could actually sit down and watch this movie together, and it's always great watching her getting excited over a movie as well. She's like a proper horror fan as well, but yeah, anything with a big monster in, she gets excited for.
Well, there we go. It's like a little date night with a movie. How nice.
Yeah, 100%.
But yeah, Cloverfield is a truly, like you're saying, it's a really interesting movie because it puts its hands sort of in every pot of genre. We're going to talk all about that anyway. But for those who don't know, obviously I go through a little bit of information about it. So and also what I did forget to mention is that Paul will obviously make sure you stick around at the end, because Paul's going to promote the absolute shit out of everything he does with Nerdy Up North. With all his co-hosts, everything like that, he's going to promote the absolute shit out of it. So stick around. I mean, the chances are you already know what it is and you're listening anyway. Of course you are. If you're listening to mine, then you're going to be listening to Nerdy Up North. But there we
Nobody
go.
listens
So
to it, man. It's fine.
there we go. So Cloverfield, it was released in 2008. It's directed by Matt Reeves, big time
Jesus.
Hollywood man now. Matt Reeves, who's
Yeah.
gone on to. Do you know what's funny actually? Because I was just like, Matt Reeves, like, what a fantastic director he is. Like, you can tell he's a fantastic director from this. Obviously, we know him since he's gone on to make some of the monkey movies. What are they, Planet of the Apes? He made a couple
Yeah.
of those. He made the absolutely fantastic reboot remake called Let Me In, which is obviously a reboot or a remake of Let the Right One In.
Yeah.
One of those movies that you never thought could be any better or anything could come close to it. But Let Me In is such a great example of how you do it if you're going to create a reboot or a remake. It's phenomenal, Let Me In. I don't know
The
if you've seen it.
atmosphere in it as well. Like the first
Yeah.
one, like you said, the original is just an absolute stonewall classic, and you think, oh, no one's going to set the tone, get that atmosphere again, because that's what it is. It's a vampire film with innocence, and you think, no, it's not going to work,
Yeah.
especially Americanized, and it was beautiful, like shot by shot.
Yeah.
It still had the same feeling. Yeah, I love that movie.
Yeah, it's a fantastic, and as I said, it's one of those movies that if anybody's watching or listening this, if you haven't seen the remake of obviously Let the Right One In, if you haven't seen Let the Right One In, watch it. It's phenomenal. If you haven't seen Let Me In, which is obviously Matt Reeves' version of that movie, still watch it. You'll be blown away of going right. Oh, okay, well that's pretty much how you do it, and how you do it right. As I
And
said, he
Matt
made some
Reeves
of the.
is one thing I want to say about Matt Reeves as well. And again, this is going to be a controversial thing to say. He gave us what, in my opinion, is the greatest Batmobile we have ever had. Like,
Yeah, I to be fair with you, I will agree with you because that Batmobile is fucking cool and it's
mm,
amazing. I don't know
best
if it's
noise,
the
the greatest
it,
noise.
yeah, absolutely. I would say, and this is one of the things that I love about Matt Reeves, and I think that, and we'll talk about that in the episode. I think it shows a little bit in this, but also I think this movie shows him more as a very clever technical director than it is a visual
Mm,
director.
yeah.
Whereas later on in the movies, obviously, like we've seen in Let Me In, like we've seen in The Batman
Mm,
from 2022, which is one of the most beautiful movies that's ever been
mm,
made, cinematography wise, visually, fucking
mm,
stunning. It doesn't really show that much in this, but we'll talk all about it. But he is
mm,
a very visual director, and I think that um, I think it shows moments of that in it, but
mm,
there's better things to look at his directing in this movie than the cinematography side of it, because obviously it's a handheld movie. There's only so much you could do. So yeah, Matt Reeves, as I said, big time director. Obviously, this was also produced by the once next Steven Spielberg, now probably not really anywhere, J.J. Abrams. I think everybody got, I think at least 80% of the audience who
mm.
watched his movies that he directed are now blind from lens flare. So, so I think that that's probably
Yeah.
what happened, is that the studios had too many court cases, and now he's gone
Mm.
away.
He's still there. I think he's still
Um,
licking his wounds after like not having the stellar performance with the Star Wars next year trilogy that he produced. But yeah, I think he'll be back. I don't think it's the end of JJ. I think he's still got some interest. But interesting, you said like everyone thought he was going to be the next Spielberg, because that was the moniker that was like put on him. Imagine that pressure being on you though, being
yeah,
explained that you're going to be the next Steven Spielberg. Uh, it's either going to do two things: blow your ego to the point where you're just going to go like going to rampage on cocaine and hookers, or it will be you would self implode with self doubt and like just
yeah.
yeah, it's never going to end well type thing.
No, pressure, as we all know and we've spoken about, is not a good thing. Whether you can handle it or not, wherever it comes from, pressure is always something that makes the best fall. And
Mhm,
but yeah, J.J. Abrams, as I said, I mean, he's a very talented director,
mhm,
talented filmmaker, and he got behind obviously this Cloverfield, movie
mhm,
and franchise in total as well, which I'm sure we'll talk about some of the other
mhm.
piece of shit movies that are in Cloverfield, in my
Hey,
opinion. But
I'll
we
defend them. I'll defend them. I think
You'll defend them. Yeah,
it's
that's all right then. Well, I'm sure we'll get into that at some point anyway. Yeah, so it's starring Michael Stahl David, Lizzie Kaplan, TJ Miller, Jessica Lucas, Mike Vogel, Odette, Annabelle, and then some other people. But what's
mhm,
interesting about this, and I think obviously the good thing about this, is that it is pretty much mostly an unknown cast. I think when I watched
mhm,
this movie, I genuinely think the only person that I knew from it was the brother that dies in it on the bridge,
mhm,
because he was in the remake of Texas Chainsaw Massacre, who got killed on a
mhm.
hook. Other than that, I don't know. Oh, and TJ Miller, I think. Oh no, this might have been the
Not to,
first time I knew
this wasn't,
TJ
yeah,
Miller.
TJ Miller wasn't a big name by then. The only other one I knew was Lizzie Kaplan because of Mean Girls.
Oh, was she in Mean Girls?
Yeah, she was one of
I
the
don't think
she was
I've
one of
ever
the
seen Mean Girls. My
oh,
partner
it's
watches it
a
all
fun
the time,
film.
but I've never seen it.
Go for it. Don't be a thing. It is a good movie. Lindsay
Yeah,
Lohan is actually not bad in that movie as well. I'll stand by that.
there we go. Well, that'd be on the list. Not to cover on the show. That's if
It
I
could be
was
a horror
doing.
movie.
Yeah, it could be. Yeah, it could be. It could be. Yeah, if you dislike it that bad, it's classed as a horror movie. So, so there we go. Google synopsis. Oh, sorry. Actually, before that, IMDb it's 7 out of 10 and 79% on Rotten Tomatoes. So still high. As I've said on this show a million times, if you're getting 6 or above on IMDb, you're practically an Oscar winner.
Right. Okay.
You are one of the greatest movies that's ever been made, practically. Google synopsis wise, after a giant monster attacks New York City, Rob, Hud, Lily, and Marlena form a group of and desperately try to rescue their friend Beth, who is trapped in her apartment. And that's it. That's what Google gives you. That's pretty much what the film is. That is pretty much essentially what it is. Normally, I ask my guests when you did first see this movie. I still think 2008 was last week. It's definitely not.
No,
That's
wish it
how
was.
that's how I feel like it was like a couple of weeks ago. But so I normally ask my guest when you first saw the movie, but I know that you've got something a bit more interesting than wondering about when
Yeah.
you first saw it. So hit me with it.
So, can you remember the buzz when this first hit? Because you didn't get the movie. This came out of nowhere. Like there wasn't any like normally at that time in 2008, the internet used to have spoilers and used to like tell you when the next big movies come out. This trailer came out of nowhere. I can remember the trailer because I think I was at the pictures watching some. I can't remember the film, but I remember this trailer hitting, and it was simply the rooftop scene, like when like it's all shaken, and it pans down to the street, and you see the head of the Statue of Liberty fire across and land in front of them, and that was all the trailer was with the claw marks on the thing. And it didn't have a name. I don't know if it said Cloverfield because the rumors were this was going to be a Godzilla movie.
Oh,
So
really? So it wasn't going to
everything was
be.
coming out
It was.
like this was going to be like the new Godzilla, and that was like what everyone was buzzing saying. Oh, Godzilla's coming back, and it's going to be by J.J. Abrams, who's going to be the new up and coming, and everyone got really really excited because like a handheld Godzilla movie just sounds so fucking unreal, and then it wasn't like when we saw the movies, it wasn't that, and that had to come out and say, "Oh, it's not Godzilla" and stuff like that. But just the buzz and kind of like that excitement of a Godzilla movie that could be like realistic and stuff. And I think that led on to what we got later on with the Godzilla movies. But I still remember that, like I said, being in the cinema and seeing that Statue of Liberty head fly across like the street in New York and just going, what the fuck's this? Like this just we need to see this movie, and that kind of like trickled in, and then the marketing campaign was very clever because it did like normally with like the big blockbusters or the big movies, they show you everything. They show you this is why you need to see this movie. This was kind of like this showing you very little or very little noise was coming out, so it kind of got you interest and got you like intrigued into saying you need to see this movie to find out what the fuck it was about. And I thought that was so clever and so well done. Not many movies have done the same since then. So that's the problem.
Yeah, yeah, you're right, and I think you've sort of opened up and sort of opened up the memories because I think when Cloverfield came out, I was working at a cinema because I
Mm.
spent a long time working at a cinema and a blockbuster as well. That's how old I
Mm.
am, and and yeah, so and I think I remember that happening, and I remember there was a lot of buzz around it, and a lot of people were talking about the fact that it could be a Godzilla movie. Um, but I don't think it's one of those things that the interesting part for me is that I don't know. I mean, people, anybody that's watching or listening to this, you can let me know. But if you were disappointed that it wasn't
Mm.
a Godzilla movie, because
Mm.
I think the quality of this movie speaks for itself.
Yeah,
With
it
the
does.
fact that it's not a Godzilla movie, I
Yeah.
think it's
I
still
think if
such
the,
a
if the
strong
movie
movie.
was shit, if it wasn't as
Yeah,
good as it was, that would have been a death kill for the movie. But I think when you got to see it and realised how good, because this movie as well, I know it's going to sound really strange. A lot of handheld or found footage movies aren't great at the cinema. They're great watching in your
yeah,
house or like say like with your friends and stuff, so you can have a bit of chatter and like banter. This was a cinema handheld movie because on the big screen it was all the more impressive. The tension on this movie is done so well, and and that sounds really thing. It couldn't give a fuck about the main who's the main characters or who was like who you thought like oh because when you get these type of like movies as well, you think that person's going to survive, that person's going to survive, this person's going to get through at the end because you get the comedy friend, you get the serious love interest, and you get like the brother and then the sister's his girlfriend, and you can normally pick and you can normally in the first 10-15 minutes you can say right these people are going to make it, that person's going to be canned
yeah.
for it. It didn't give a fuck. It was like, right, we're going to cut ties whenever we feel like it. So it added a level of danger and like anticipation that you didn't know what was going to happen, and so cleverly done, so well done.
Yeah. and I think we've already spoken a bit about him as well. And I think that, and I've done a couple of episodes like this where they end up all going back to like the main source of the filmmaker, the director, the person
Mm-hmm.
creating it. And I think that this is going to be one of those episodes where, when we're talking about stuff, essentially it all leads back to Matt Reeves.
Mm-hmm.
And his direction and his filmmaking on creating something, because you're absolutely right. Um, there's a lot to talk about with this movie, but like one of the first things is, so this, I think to this day is still the most expensive. I could be wrong, but I think it's still the most expensive handheld horror or final what they fucking called it, whatever, footage movie. Fucking, I've forgotten what it is. You know
Found
what I mean?
footage.
But it's,
Yeah.
yeah, that's it. Yeah, found footage. That's it. It cost 25 million to make,
Mm-hmm.
which is obviously a big budget, and especially for these
Mm-hmm.
types of movies, you know, because obviously most of them are made for absolutely pittance. So
Yeah.
25 million. But I think it's one of those movies that you can't go, right, well, they've spent 25 million on this movie and where is it gone? Like this
Mm-hmm.
movie, the scale of this movie is incredible. Like I love,
Mm-hmm.
like it's weird that they never, or they haven't tried doing this really again. Like they continue to try doing handheld horrors and you know, and handheld movies and so on, and they did a really shit one that was in space, and I can't remember what it was, and it was fucking awful, and it had like rock crabs and everything like that. It was awful. um I can't
Right.
remember what it was called, but I remember watching it and I was just like, they had so many opportunities to do giant crab rock things
Mm-hmm.
and they didn't, and it was
Yeah.
rubbish. And I think that had a bit of a budget.
Mm-hmm.
But the thing is with this, like, it's interesting because this feels like, and it's exactly to the point that you were making. This feels like one of the only blockbuster cinema, like big cinema found footage movies.
Yeah. I
Um,
think how like the way you explain it is good. It feels like a bigger movie than it is because of how compact they make it. Because
yeah,
if you think of all the shots that they do it very close in, and you don't get any like wide angles unless like you go on the helicopter and side of things. But all the kind of like the things that is filmed, it's like a really narrow staircase when they're going up to the roof, coming back down. The streets of New York is very like linear. They go into the subway again. It's very compact and like not like that much going on. Then they get the pan of the everything that's like kicking off with the army inside of things. Then they get the big shot where they have to go to rescue Beth up in the tower. That's like the big set piece of thing. But everything else is like visually is very compact and very in. That's probably how they've got away with. I know 25 million budget's a large budget for like the way that New York looked and how apocalyptic and destroyed it was. This just looked massive, and I think
yeah.
with the way they did it, and where Matt Reeves is very clever in like how they used the photography and used the filming process. They give the impression that the scope was everything bigger than it was, but was so compact and claustrophobic at times as well. So it was really well done.
Yeah, and you're right as well. They talk a lot about it's here, it's doing this here,
Mm,
like this has happened here, and so on. And that obviously helps, you know, it's like sort of deliver that like idea of this is a big deal.
mm,
So we hear about it, we see about it, but you're right. Like this is a very, I see this is what's really clever is that it is a very like it is a character piece movie, so to
mm,
speak. Like you're, like you said, you're on this journey with these friends, with these like, you know, lovers, that where this guy, you know, Romeo and Juliet style, where he's got to
mm.
go after this girl that he loves to save her. Well, you know, do people do this in real life most of the time? No, but it's a movie, so of course they will. But yeah, so I think I like the fact that we're on this journey with people that you actually don't mind. Like they're not annoying, they're
Oh no,
good. All the
they've got
performances
very
in
much
this are good.
like ability as well. Um,
Yeah,
One thing I did think was a masterstroke and a genius in the way they made this movie as well is how they're telling two stories at the same time with the footage.
yeah,
Because if every time like the camera stops, like recording or they're doing something, it jumps back to the footage that was on the videotape that was recorded like a week or like a few weeks before about like say the date between Beth, and I've got his name now, Rob, their like date to Coney Island, and how that's playing along at the same time as the destruction. So you've got this amazing love story in the background, and it's kind of like teetering on and saying, "Oh, will they get to Coney Island? What's going on?" And again, they didn't need to do that because you could have just got the found footage of showing like the monster attack and there, but it kind of brought a little bit more to the movie, so give it a bit more layers. So you cared more, you give a shit, and that's what the hardest thing to do with these type of movies, or like monster movies, horror movies as well, is care about your characters, and they were very clever with how they've got that element in there.
Yeah, and you're right, and it's also to go to the point that you said earlier as well, is that the characters that you're on obviously the journey with, like I was saying, like you're happy to be with them, but also the unpredictability of the movie, the fact that you like these characters or you don't have a problem with these characters, is that when things do happen to them, they're so unexpected. That you do feel more for these characters, because you're like when the brother goes on the bridge in such
Oh
like it's such an amazing scene, but you're like, oh shit, like I didn't see that coming, you know.
no,
So and you know, we get later on with the way that TJ Miller meets his demise and stuff like that, and I mean we're getting to like nearer the end of the film in a bit as well, but one of the things I do sort of want to talk about is going right back to the start, and the right at the start of this movie is one of the things that made me go, oh, okay, like you never, when you start watching a movie, you never really know obviously the journey that you're on until you start really getting into, say, like 15 minutes or so into it. And this film starts off where obviously you're at this party where what's his name, Rob, I think it is, I think you said his name was Rob, but
yeah,
the guy that's going after the girl, he is you know, he's going away. This is where you get the sense of like the friendship. You get the sense of that, you know, that there's a little bit more to this, you know, this love story, so to speak. Also,
sets
we're
my
talking about
social anxiety like off as well, because being at a party, being got close to people, it's like, no, let me out of
oh
here.
yeah,
Out.
and it's weird talking about a love story on a horror podcast. But yeah, so they have those moments in it. But what I love, and as I said, and this is why this movie at the start to this movie is so important for people who enjoy movies as not just watching it, but movies on a very well technical level in regards to like structure. And that is what I love, is that we have this moment, but then straight away it goes from 1 to 11. Like there's
Yeah.
no in between. It's like literally as soon as they're there and you hear that big bang, and they go to the roof, and then it all kicks off. From that point on, it's a constant. You know, everything is at a constant threat, and
Yeah.
you don't know what's going to happen. And I think that's why the start to this movie is really important, because you're very cleverly introduced to the characters you're on the journey with, but then it really opens up to a point where like you're almost like back when you watch this for the first time, you're sort of put back in your seat and you're like, oh shit, like, oh, here we go, like this is it, we're on now. And then we get, you know, the Statue of Liberty head,
Yeah.
and you're like, at that time you're like, I've not seen something like that, you know. And obviously apart from Escape from New York, you know what I mean, but you know what I mean. And then you're like, oh shit, and then you get the little moments where you see this monster in the background and you're like, what the fuck's that?
Yeah.
And then
It's like the
everything
peekaboo type
works.
of horror type thing. It's like, did I really say that? Is that there?
Yeah,
It's like not
yeah,
showing you like the big, like it's like the Jaws effect. You don't see the shark till an hour into the movie, so
yeah,
not giving like the punters like the big scare, the big monster, what they're all waiting
the
for
big
straight
reveal.
away. So it's
Yeah,
masterful, but it's again but again what you're saying, it's a reflection on humans as well, because when the Statue of Liberty's head goes down the street, my first impulse would be get the fuck out of New York. All the
yeah,
New Yorkers, all the people were there with the camera phones, taking photos, taking selfies with the head. I was like, that's what people would probably be like though now as
yeah,
well. If things had
yeah,
happened, like they would whip out the phone saying, "I'm going to get an Instagram shot with this," just be rather than trying to survive. Uh, and again, TJ
yeah,
Miller's
yeah. You're
character,
right.
Hood or Hudson, is basically just saying he's carrying the camera, and they keep asking him a few times, like, "Why are you doing it?" He's like, "I'm going to have to document because people won't believe if we just tell them this has happened. we're going to have
Yeah,
to show them this is what's happening as well, which again, and I know the camera plays its part in the movie as well, so like especially in the tunnels when they realize it's got a light, it can help them through, and then they use the, like I say, the night vision to perfect timing as well. But like with any of these type of movies, you live and die on the monster or
yeah,
monsters. And I think Cloverfield is up there with one of the most horrific looking monsters, not to the point where it was ridiculous. And again, probably seen it now in full HD, cleaned it up a little bit more. So it's kind of like, oh, I liked it when it was a little bit fuzzier, a little bit dirtier, because that was like say thing. But the monster was really good. But the little monsters that came off it
yeah,
remind us of like arachnoids from Starship Troopers, but
yeah,
a
yeah.
much more terrifying effect.
Yeah, that's right, and I like that they had that sort of. I think that I like that they did that because it gave the extra layer to what this creature is, but also it gave you the extra layer to what the movie becomes, so to speak, when it has these extra like parasite things that come off it, and these like weird dog crab fucking things, that like so vicious
I'm
that
sure you've
they.
got
I
having
like the.
nightmares about crabs now. That's like,
Yeah, I know. That's it. I know. That's it. But yeah, I love that extra thing because obviously normally, it just becomes about this giant monster that's going through the city and so on. But this monster, not only is the monster a threat, but these things that it's are coming off of him and coming out of him and all that, they're now a threat as well. So it makes you. It's one of those movies that make you sort of take a step back and think to yourself like, well, what would you do in these situations, and how would you sort of do this? And I love when movies make you have that sort of experience when you come away from a movie and you still think about the movie and you're like, oh shit, like what would I do in these sort of situations?
yeah.
That's when you're like, oh, okay, this is a very well made, put together movie. Obviously, in a real situation, probably all of us will be dead. But in movie worlds,
Yeah.
it doesn't really work like that. Um, but like we've already mentioned, as I said, the performances from all the cast very very good. Each of them are all their individual characters rather than blending into one, and that's what I really like about it. Like we've mentioned as well, like T.J. Miller is sort of there for the comic relief, so to speak, of the movie.
Yeah.
But then we've got like the more serious undertone of them trying to get to this place and so on, to save his girlfriend or his wannabe girlfriend, whatever it is. But the performances itself, absolutely very good. Um,
Just to go over T.J. Miller in this as well, because everyone pretty much has a friend like T.J. Miller that would bring up, as you mentioned, like when we were in the tunnels, he was mentioning about the homeless guy being set on fire. It's like, why would you even bring that up at that time?
yeah,
Like, again, just saying the most inappropriate things or the most stupid things that doesn't need to be said or how to be said. Just because you're in a, like I say, a pressurized situation where you're not comfortable, so your mind does things. And again, I thought that was like, I think it needed that element as well, because if there wasn't like a jokey type of character or someone like kind of break the tension, this could have been too intense for a lot of different reasons as well.
yeah, yeah, absolutely. Yeah, you're absolutely right. And also, I will go out and say it, but Marlene's a dick. She was such a dick at the start of the movie. She didn't want to know, but obviously, like most characters in these sort of movies, they sort of grow on you a little bit until
Yeah,
she blows
but
up.
it's one of those things though, because I know she, as you said, it could be a dick, but imagine, like, say, a young lass in New York being in that type of situation. Like, how many these creepy or sleazy guys try and pick her up, like
Yeah,
on a nightly basis? So, like, at least she wasn't rude or anything like that. She was like, "Oh no," just made an excuse and got away. I can understand being standoffish as well, because you probably have shit days where you don't want to like have some dude or some woman flirting with you as well. So it was interesting that, as you said, it was a quite a natural kind of a chemistry that they built between her and
yeah,
Hood, which was quite nice because he instantly liked her and was like the hound dog, which again is the typical bloke, like pretty girl, I want to hump a leg type thing. And she kind of like played it out and took her time and I got to know him and then realized, like, say, oh, this could be interesting, and then unfortunately got taken out the way she did in one of the most brutal and just amazing like death scenes like in this movie as well. But again, what I love about this movie is it doesn't always show you everything. It's what you don't see, and her death is kind of like an old puppet show. Like it's almost like going behind a sheet. She's been bitten
Yeah.
by one of those little crab monsters, as you called it, and the wound that seeps out on her shoulder is just, it's ghastly, and you think, oh, that, like, and when she's not feeling well, you think, oh, she's bleeding out, and that's going to be it. But you don't realize, then you see the blood dripping from her eyes, and it's like, fuck, what's happening? And they're panicking and getting her in the zone, and then you see her explode, because that must have been like blood pressure and stuff like building up. I was just like, fuck, that's just amazing. Like, again, and then after that, it doesn't just hold it on it. It like goes right, fast pace, fast cut, move them to the next thing, and it was again perfectly timed and perfectly well done. But yeah, sorry.
Yeah, and I like what's great about that scene as well is that there's two things that's great about it. One, it's an unpredictable scene, very much like most of this movie, which is great because movies that are unpredictable are so interesting. And then also it keeps your attention so much more because you're not expecting anything. Like you don't know where, as soon as you give in to the unexpected, where you're like, oh, okay, I don't know where this movie is going to go. It makes it ultimately like so much more interesting, like immediately. And in that scene, what I love about it is that it shows the unpredictability, but also it then, because you don't see what happens, but you know what happens,
Mm-hmm.
it makes it heightens the threat for everybody else in the movie because you as a viewer you're like, oh, okay, because now if anything happens to these people, like they get
Mm-hmm.
bitten by these dog crab monster things, well, we know what happens. So it's not as if like, you know, they get bitten and that's it, everybody's fine and they can get stitched up. Like we know that if anything happens to any of these people like that in the movie now, or anyone, well, that's their fate. And that's
Yeah.
what's so interesting about that scene is that not only is it a fantastic scene, like you say, because sort of less is more and it's unpredictable, and you
Mm-hmm.
don't expect that that's like she's going to go. Like she's one of those people that you expect is probably going to be there at the end with the other
Mm-hmm.
people. Once again is the unexpectedness of this, what this movie is, and how it can, you know, conducts itself.
Mm-hmm.
But I like the fact that once again it's clever filmmaking because then once again giving you a moment where you're like, by the way, here's another level of threat that we're going to add to this movie that
Mm-hmm.
they've got to contend with if they're going to try and survive. So it's so very well put together. It's very clever, and it's another one. It's another moment in the movie where, even though I've seen this movie so many times over the years, it's another moment in the movie where I'm like, this is why someone like Matt Reeves has
Mm-hmm.
gone and done what he's done, and
Yeah.
he's been so sort of commercially and also critically successful
Mm-hmm.
because he manages to create moments in movies like this, and like he had did with a lot of scenes in this movie. So, I mean, this movie is so big, but there's so many scenes in it that you're like the first time when they go around the corner and they see the building that it's
Mm-hmm.
you know, on sort of like it's the, you know, falling
The
over onto
access.
the
Yeah.
other building, yeah, on
Mm-hmm.
its act, and then you're like, oh, she's in there, so then now they've got to go into this building, and it becomes about not only have they got the threat of the fact that the building could go, but once they're again, we already know of the threat that there could be these fucking monsters in there. There's got this monster going around, this big giant monster going around the town, going around New York. You know, you've got you know, you've got all this going on, and they've still got to go from here to here. So
Yeah,
it's a
like I say, if you
very
look at
very clever
the
movie.
story wise is very very basic. It's not really like overcomplicated, and that's, I think with these type of movies, a lot of people do make the mistake of overcomplicating it, adding too much stuff. It is very simple. They need to get to like a certain point, then they need to get, like, say, rescue someone, and then get out. And the things that's going on, like along with that story, is basically New York's basically turned into ground zero. Um, this monster they've hinted at isn't being defeated. The army is losing it, so like they're doing last case scenario where they're going to bring they say they use the hammer down. So basically, that it sounds like they're going to nuke New York, Manhattan, sorry, which again is just a terrifying thought. That would like say the army or would the US government, if they were feeling like they were losing the territory rather than like say letting it spread, would they just go right, click the buttons, take it out, we'll take the loss, that like on their own soil. And again, it's like it plays with your mind. I think probably would do that, especially with who's in charge now. The probably wouldn't even have the second thought. It was like, oh shit, something's happened in New York. He's like, right, blow it up. It's like, we don't know what's happened. Blow the fucker up. But yeah, it's just this again. It's a very basic, simple plot, but the way they do it, they keep adding. I'm trying to think of the word. Like, it's been a long day. I'm sorry, I've been to work as well. Like the threat levels keep on ramping up. It's
Yeah.
like
Yeah,
first level, it's like
it constantly has moments where it's just like 1 minute you think, oh, okay, like we're going on this like journey now. This is where we're going to go, and then it throws something else in, and another moment, and you're like, oh shit, like I didn't expect that, and now we've got this thing to accomplish, and now they've got to overcome this, and then next thing you know, they've done that thing. But now they're fucked by the next thing. But yeah, you're right. That's what's great about this movie. And like I said, and it's always going to keep going back to people like Matt Reeves in this episode, because you're exactly right. It's the premise, the idea, the concept is very basic. I mean, and once again, it's essentially like a Godzilla movie, like
yeah,
we've already said. But it's about the craft of it, and that's what's great about this movie, is that from
yep,
start to finish, this is a very, very well expertly crafted movie, rather than it just being somebody with a camera going around and these things are happening. It's actually the way I
it's
look at this movie,
yeah.
funny enough, is I actually look at this movie as not a found footage movie. I look at it as an actual movie that so happens to use that as the format.
And so that's just their technique, how they've told the story. Um, I love the way you've said it. It is one of the most cleverest movies that, like, from start to finish. I love the way you put that, because at the finish, it has the perfect full stop. And again, it doesn't overly do it, and it's very much blink and you miss it type situation. Because when, like, say the footage ends with, like, say, basically the nuke coming down, blowing up, and you're thinking, oh, that's going to be the end. The footage clicks on to the second story that was going on behind the scenes between like Beth and Rob, where they're at Coney Island, they're on the Ferris wheel, and they're doing the view, and you're seeing out in the sea, and if
Yeah,
you blink and you miss it, you see something hit the water, and it's not
yeah,
overly done. It's not like say overly said, "Oh shit, what's happening?" It's kind of like if you've seen it, great. If you didn't see it, so it's kind of like the end of that point is the starting point of everything to come. So, and it doesn't say, "Oh, that's the starting point." It's just something hitting the water. And it's like, is that the thing that's fallen from space to cause this? It probably is, but it just leaves that little bit of wonder and that little thing. And again, that's just a beautifully crafted story, knowing exactly how he wants to play it and how he wants to, and having the balls and comfort levels to go, I'm just going to throw this in there. If they get it, great. If they don't, they're still not going to lose anything from this movie. And I think
yeah.
it's just effortless, I think.
Yeah, that was going to be one of my questions to you as well. Is did you notice the bit at the end? Because
Yeah.
obviously, still to this day, there's still a lot of people. There's still a lot of people that don't know that moment happens, and there might be
Yeah.
people that, I mean, I'm sure people that are watching or listening to this do know. But if you
Mhm.
don't know, yeah, there is the moment at the end when once again, and that's one of the other things. I'll go back to that as well. One of the eh, how this movie ends and so on. I'll go back to it. But right at the end of the movie, when they're on, yeah, they're like a trip to Coney Island. Yes, so right, if you look at the top right
They
hand
went on the
corner,
trip for the
you will,
Warriors, but yeah.
yeah, yeah, you will see basically something hit the water, and that is like you're saying. That's essentially saying sort of like, this is when they were here. This is when it happened, and then everything sort of unfolds from there. But going back to the end once again, there's so much that's so commendable about what this movie is, because we have essentially our leads, the
Mm-hmm.
lovers that we follow the whole journey.
Mm-hmm.
Essentially, they're dead. And
Yeah.
that's what's great about this movie, that we follow every character that we follow in this
Mm-hmm.
movie, apart from what, one
Mm-hmm.
dies. I
That we
think
know of.
because the brother dies, the
Yeah.
brother's girlfriend, I think she gets away.
No, because the
Um,
helicopter that she was on gets
no,
smashed in.
that's it. Yeah, so she dies as well.
Yeah. Yeah.
And then obviously TJ Miller, he gets,
He gets nom-nommed.
slingshotted by the giant
Yeah.
monster. And then you've got the two lovers. Marlene, obviously, she blows up, and
Yeah.
then the two lovers. So, but everyone dies. So
Mm-hmm.
it's one of those two. So basically, it's such. But you never, like, when you get to the end of it as well, you're not like, oh well, that fucking sucks. Like, you know what I mean? Like, you do feel like that, but
Yeah, but
at the same time, you're like, oh yeah, but I've just seen a brilliant movie.
yeah, I think it's sad in a way because of everything that they had survived to get to that point as
Yeah,
well. They got off, like I say, the collapsing building. They pulled her off the spike, which looked brutal and sounded like the sound effects in this movie is so on point. It's amazing.
yeah,
They
I'll
get
go
all the
into
way
that.
through.
Yeah,
They get through all the way through the city. They get the chopper. They get to the chopper, and to get take off the helicopter
it's a
even
chopper.
crashes, and like I say, once it crashes, you think, what the fuck do these have to do? And it's like the sun's coming out, it's starting to get sunshine. It's like, oh, there's got to be a happy end. And then TJ Miller looks up and they're standing underneath this behemoth
Giant.
of a kaiju. And then he gets thrown about. And then they run, and you think, oh, they're under a bridge, they're going to be fine. And I think, I don't know why, it just seems weird that this monster has kind of like followed these people around as well, because everywhere they've went, this kind of monster's been kind of gross following them. So I don't know if the connection is when it's following the sea. It's like it's that's their connection, that it's kind of trying to locate them. I don't know. That's me looking into it too much, but I don't know. Just trying to put the theory out there. But then they dropped the bomb on them because in my head the monster's over the bridge, so that was like the big target zone where it was going to be hitting, and it's quite poignant because when they're under the bridge, it's quite meaningful because they're having like they're not talking to each other, they're talking to the camera, so they're saying leave the message, and they're like and Beth's just like completely gone now, just so terrified, total with fear, doesn't know what to say, and then when it's all thing, they tell each other they love each other. So this must be the first time first and unfortunately the last time that they get to tell each other like how they truly feel, which is heartbreaking. But again, not all stories have to have a nice ending or a nice full like tick, or the good guys win, or we don't know how America is after this. So it's quite interesting. Did the alien come over and take over the complete world? Did they destroy it? Because every time they kind of bombed it, it kind of gets stronger, which again was quite interesting. Very Godzilla-esque again.
Yeah, you're right. And I think it goes back to something you said earlier on, that about basically having the big balls, the big cojones to
Mhm.
take this movie and kill everyone. And
Yeah.
that, that's to have the balls to do that. Normally in movies like this, the couple will be the one that rides off
Mhm.
into the sunset. There
Yeah.
be like what happens within the movie. They get away in the nick of time on a helicopter, and then you'll
Mhm.
see the explosion in the background.
'Cause
What, they're safe, but it
Yeah,
doesn't.
because
It doesn't.
technically they could have
They're
done
not
it
safe.
two. They could have done it two ways. They could have, like as I said, finished it the way they had, which I think is the more satisfying ending. Which again, maybe made as a sadist, but I think it puts a nice full stop on it. Or they could have done like say with everything, like dropping the bomb, like the helicopter flying away, and they dropped the camera, and the camera like they're panicking saying, "Oh no, who's going to think?" So that's how it's finding footage because the camera was dropped and found. That
Yeah.
could have been like the little get out to have a happier ending, but I don't think this movie needs. It definitely doesn't need to have a happy ending. I think if you had a
No.
happy ending, it would have brought the threat level and like it would have brought the level of the movie down as well.
Yeah, and also you're right. The thing is that the idea of the fact that they're the threat level when this movie ends, the
Mm-hmm.
threat is still persistent. Like, the
Yeah.
threat is still there. So it's
Mm-hmm.
not as if the movie ends and so does the monster, so does everything. You don't
Mm-hmm.
know, apart from obviously we've had the sequels and the prequels and all that sort of stuff, which I'm sure we'll talk about. But the when this movie ends, the
Mm-hmm.
threat is still there.
Yeah.
So that's what, once again, is so clever, that this is such a very, very well thought out, put together, clever idea, like, movie where, like we've
Mm-hmm.
said, the idea is essentially Godzilla. The concept, the story is pretty basic, but like any good filmmaker, it's about going from A, B to C and
Mm-hmm.
doing that in a very clever, competent, and very structured way,
Yeah.
and telling that story of not just the characters, but telling
Mm-hmm.
the story about what's happening.
Yeah.
And it's so well done in this movie that we
Mm-hmm.
get a sense of who these people are, and their journey. And then we get a sense of everything that's happening on this very large scale as well. And also, one of
Yeah.
the other interesting things that I heard is that the monster itself, the Cloverfield monster, is apparently it's like a baby. So
Right.
apparently this monster is actually a baby, and the reason that it's going around destroying the city is that it doesn't know, because it's
Mm-hmm.
scared. It's actually terrified. And
Right.
so the fact that it's actually going around, like, as I said, destroying the city, all that sort of stuff, is because it's almost like a dog that, without its
Mm-hmm.
owner, that's trying to
Yeah.
go around trying to find its way back home.
Mm-hmm.
Apparently, that's one of the reasons as to why there's so much destruction, what it's doing and stuff. That it's essentially,
Yeah.
it's not, it doesn't know what it's doing. It's
No.
actually a baby of what it is.
Mm-hmm.
So I found that quite interesting as like an idea or a concept as to what this thing is, because
Mm-hmm.
you know it's that thing about Godzilla. Like, does Godzilla know what he's doing? And if he
Oh, yeah.
does, then he's a son of a bitch, right? But that's the thing. It becomes about, like, does Godzilla know what it's doing? And that to me is quite an interesting concept, that this thing
Mm-hmm.
comes from outer space to this planet that it doesn't know. But also, we don't necessarily know whether this is like a clever being,
Yeah.
so it goes around, it's a baby, it's terrified, and that's causing all this destruction. And
Mm-hmm.
then obviously, as humans, we're trying to destroy this thing,
Yeah.
that doesn't really know what it is, and doesn't know what it's doing, and doesn't
Mm-hmm.
understand the destruction it's causing. And it's one of
No.
those things, well, you've got to do it. But so I found
Mm-hmm.
that quite interesting as a theory, or what it
Yeah.
is.
So it could have been like, say, this thing was this beast from outer space was just, as I said, lost and trying to move forward. Then what would happen is, I can't be words it now. If that was the case, and then them little crab things were maybe like parasites that had attached itself to it when it's going through. So
Yeah.
it's not like as you said, like a predator, like a shark going through the sea. It gets little things that attaches itself to the shark or to the whale and stuff as well. So interesting. I could see that working the same way, but yes, it's
Yeah,
very
and it's a
interesting.
really cool. I don't know what you do. You think? Do you like? I mean, I like the design of the creature as well. I think it
I really
looks
liked
pretty
it. I think it
cool.
was unusual, very different, nothing that we've kind of seen before as well, which I think's always a positive, because it could have went down the route of just doing a giant lizard or giant like a kaiju thing, but it was kind of like a beast that with not really any did. Like, if you try to describe the features of that monster, it's very hard to describe. It's very like lanky. It's everything's kind of
Yeah, it's
like
very gangly
gangly. Yeah, gangly.
monster
That was the
thing.
word I was reaching for. Um, but yeah, it's a strange one, because you, like, for most of the part of the movie, you get it through glimpse. You only see the real monster like two or three times at the most, like in full glory. Where you don't, but again, even when you see it from one angle, it looks different from another. So it never looks like one of those things where you think, "Oh, that's cute." Everything looks quite like menacing or horrid and
Yeah,
stuff like
you know,
that. So
yeah,
it's like, as I said, perfect nightmare fuel. So the design and everything, I thought, done well, and especially, as you said, the little crab things that kind of bounce off it or drop off it, or layers, depending on how people see or deem that to come out. I think, again, just done so well.
Yeah, and there's also, I'll ask you this as well, but I'm pretty sure I know where you're going to be with it. But there's always a question that you sort of ask about these types of movies. But like we all know, a lot of the time less is more. But there are a lot of
Mhm.
people out there who like to see the monster itself, or whatever it is. So,
Yeah.
are you someone that would like to have seen more of what the Cloverfield monster is, or are you happy
No,
that
you
you
didn't need
got the
to.
brief glimpses?
It's not that type of movie where it's not like you're watching them. It's, you said it perfectly at the start. This is a character piece about the people who were trapped in this like this tragedy. This is not a movie about this monster. It's not a Godzilla movie. It's not a King Kong movie where you're waiting to see the big monkey or the big lizard. You're wanting to see these people, how they're going to react in this situation, how they're going to maneuver in a world where like things that we've got nothing we can control, and how people are going to react to that. That's what this movie's about. It's not about watching a movie, a monster go around the city and destroy it, or cause, again, if you saw too much, this movie wouldn't be scary. You would just be like
Yeah.
watching, like the old. This is going to show my age now. The old Mega Drive game Rampage, where you got basically a giant monkey and a giant lizard that
Oh, is that like
destroyed
the Mortal
buildings.
Kombat game, but with different like monsters?
Oh, it wasn't like, it wasn't fighting each other. You used to basically just see who could destroy the building and take people out of the building quickest. So you basically climb up and punch the building. The Rock did a movie version of it,
Of course
where a
he did.
giant monkey coming
Was
in
he a rock?
with a rock.
Um,
Yeah.
there's also, I've only got a couple other things really to talk about. Obviously, I put that it's great set design, and what I mean
Mhm.
by that is that the set design in this is fantastic because,
Mhm.
like we said, it has its moments where most of it is following on a very small scope, following
Mhm.
the journey of these characters. But then every now and again, it will open it up and show the scale, like I mentioned about the building falling over, like the moment where we get the wide shot of the streets with the horse going through.
Mhm. That was
And I
haunting.
love
That was
moments.
proper
Yeah,
haunting.
it
That,
was. It
yeah.
was very haunting, and you're right. And it's one of those moments where you're like, it hits you because there's, even though this is an unrealistic movie, there are moments where it hits you, the realism of it, of going, oh fuck, like if that
Mhm.
was real, that would be, like you said, haunting, terrifying, and you get
Yeah.
those moments of realism. So, but what I think is fantastic is that obviously they did a lot of work with this movie where a lot of it was on sets and then they could go on to location.
Mhm.
I think they were trying to film a couple days in New York and so on, but they managed to acquire like a week, so they managed to get
Right.
more footage, which is great for the movie. But
So
I think that
did they
it
film it the
works.
same as they did like 20, was it 28 days later, where like they filmed London but at the times when
Oh, yeah,
nobody,
like 3 in the morning or something like
yeah,
that.
something like that,
Yeah,
yeah.
yeah, probably more likely. I don't think that I mean, that 25 million isn't too bad. So they might have been able to close down certain moments or
Mm,
close down certain things. Possibly, 25 million isn't too bad. But what I like about it, and the reason I put the set design and stuff, is that I think that they did a fantastic job where it's all seamless. And that's what's great
mm,
about this movie. Everything is seamless. So you don't know what's the set, what's real, everything sort of feels like everything's so naturally put together that you're
yeah.
like, oh, okay, well, this must be the real street, this must be the
Mm,
real Manhattan, so to speak.
mm,
You're never really taken out of it going, well, that's a set, you know what I
mm,
mean? So
yeah.
it's very well put together set design wise. And the other thing to go with, once again, the filmmaking stuff is, and you mentioned it earlier as well, this movie is great because, and I don't know why they fucking do it, but this is a movie that does handheld horrors, right? Because it doesn't have any music in it.
Mhm.
And these movies should never have music in it, but for some reason, some of them do, and it's fucking ridiculous. Because then you're like, who's doing the music?
Yeah.
Um,
Mhm.
just some flute player in the background doing it. I don't know, but
Or
it's
going off as
ridiculous.
a guy on the subway playing Spider Man, Spider Man.
Yeah, yeah, that's it. But the sound design in this movie, the sound is so great because they use it. What's clever about this movie is that they use, and I don't know if you noticed this, they used sound in this movie like a score.
Yeah.
So what happens is you notice that it's quiet, but when things start ramping up and becomes more intense, they're using the sound of the city, the sound of gunfire, the sound of the monster itself. They're using that to ramp up the tension. So then you go, oh shit, something's going to happen. It's like
Yeah.
the moments when they're like, right, we've got to move. The
Mm-hmm.
things start becoming, so it starts creating more of like that tension, that anxiety in you as somebody that's watching it. But they're doing that through sound, and that's so clever because obviously it's not a score. It's just combination of sounds where they're
Yeah.
adding them together to create. And the sound design is so good in this. Like obviously the explosions are fantastic. I love when they go into that building that's sort of got Rob's sort of love interest in it, and it's obviously the windows are all gone, and you've got the sound of the wind rushing around and so on like that. It's so cleverly put together that every aspect of this movie, like I think it. It's a shame that this movie, well, it's not a shame, but it's one of those movies that now, obviously, it's 2008. It's a long time ago now, which is mental because I said it feels like a couple of days for me. But it's 2008 now, and movies like this over time, people like these movies. They go back to these movies, they enjoy them, but they're never necessarily spoken about in regards to their impact of what they have as a film,
Yeah,
as a
it's not
process.
like a one where if you're talking about like people's top 10 films, it'll never hit like that level, but it is up there with like filmmaking. One like up there were great, and I think it's interesting like you said about the sound because when it's done well, you very rarely notice it. Because if you're watching this movie, you would think, "Oh, I'm gonna why am I not listening? Why is there no songs? Why is there no tunes and stuff like that?" It's done so well, and it's kind of like so intense at the same time that it's effortless that you don't notice it, and it's so cleverly done. But again, it's one of the more intelligent movies that you can see that's got a giant monster in it.
Yeah, exactly right. And that's, I think, a good way to end like a discussion, like an in-depth discussion here. Before we get into our overall thoughts and stuff, it's the intelligence of this movie that is what I take from it every single time. And a lot of that, once again, is down to Matt Reeves.
Definitely.
So yeah, he's just over the years, he's one of those people that when you watch his movies, you really know that he's one of those people that understands the craft of not only storytelling, but he understands the technical craft of filmmaking. And that is exciting. For someone like me, that's very, very exciting. And the fact that he showed it back in 2008 with Cloverfield is an absolute testament to his abilities. So yeah, you're right. Like intelligence is what this movie is, even though it could have been just a fucking giant monster movie, blockbuster movie where things blew up. There's so much more to it. And I think that's one of the reasons why it's good to have an episode like this, because it's about talking about the fact that it is more than just a big Hollywood blockbuster that blows shit up like a Michael Bay movie. Like
Yeah,
imagine if
yeah, and
this
this
was
could
Michael
have been a
Bay.
Michael. If you talk about the premise of the film, this ticks every box of what a Michael Bay movie could be. But again, it is a big movie that's done on a small scale, and again, making it a movie about the people rather than the monster is again it's given us more than it's given us a movie that we didn't think we needed, but when we got it, we fucking loved it.
Yeah, absolutely. So as usual on the show, I always do some production info and some facts. So the running time of the film without credits is 80 minutes. Is about 80 minutes. The length of a long-running mini DV tape, a common format used in consumer camera recorders.
Mm-hmm.
So essentially, what they're saying is that it was the runtime of the movie was essentially the runtime of what you had on the tape in the camcorder that they're using, which is a clever, like, cool little touch. Because once again, you're like, that's a director's choice where they're like, yeah, that's cool.
Mm-hmm.
The film was shot in 34 days in Los Angeles under the fake title of Slusho. And in New York, it was under the fake title of Cheese.
Cheese. Oh well.
Yeah, that's it.
Should
So,
have just
so
called the
yeah,
film
they're the
Cheese.
most
That would have
random
been
fake
interesting.
titles. Yeah, exactly. Imagine you like in New York and what movie you making? They're like, oh,
Cheese.
Cheese,
Cheese.
and they're like, oh, what's that? The idea of having air raid sirens blaring in the background at the end was actually Steven Spielberg's idea. He felt the sirens would serve effectively as a countdown to the massive blast that eventually comes. So
Ah.
Steven Spielberg himself has a hand in this movie as well.
So
Legend.
JJ is still like under the guidance of the master.
Yeah, that's it. It's like J.J. Abrams is producing this movie. He's probably there with Matt Reeves going, you should try this, you should try that. And then Steven Spielberg sees it and goes, you should try that. And yeah,
Just do,
like a
it
Yoda
doesn't
of
say doesn't try
filmmaking.
that. It says do this now. I'm Steven Spielberg.
Yeah,
Put it on print.
yeah, exactly. During Marlena's death, most people would catch a squelching sound and her blood being sprayed. But if you slow it down, you see the shadow of her body not only visibly swell, but after it bursts, you can see that all that's left is her midsection. Afterwards is probably her spine. So
Ah,
yeah,
that
if
makes
you
sense.
slow it down, you can sort
That
of
makes
see it.
sense because the army people that's getting like things. A lot of them didn't have a midsection.
Yeah,
Ah,
that's right. Yeah, yeah. So yeah, and if you slow it down, I'm yet to do it, but I'm sure I will at some point. Um, but yeah, you can sort of slow it down and see a little bit more than what you thought you probably saw originally, anyway. And then after the closing credits, there is a mysterious broadcast voice. When played in reverse, the broadcast says it's still alive.
right.
Um, there we go. So that's some production info facts. One thing that I did forget to mention as well is one of my very few gripes about the movie, because I
Right.
don't want to add it to my overall thoughts, because I want that to be good. But my one of my only very few gripes of the movie is obviously there are moments for me where there's it's very difficult to maintain a reason for a camera when you're doing a handheld or found footage movie. This movie does it very well, but there is the moment when they're with all the army and everything like that. As far as I'm concerned, as soon as they go in there with a camera, the army would have told them to
Yeah.
turn it off.
Yeah.
Shut it down. And also, it wasn't like where they sometimes go shut it down and they're like, oh, okay, and he puts it in like a bag or holds it down. They were filming the whole thing. So you're
Yeah.
like, if this is like, a government thing, an army thing, all that sort of stuff, straight away the camera would have gone off. So
Yeah.
realistically, it would have been they have that moment, it goes off, and then the camera comes back on when they're outside or so on. That's one of my very few only gripes with the movie is like
Yeah, but
that
you can put that
scene,
down to
even though
movie
it's
magic,
great.
though.
Yeah, exactly. It's movie magic. Even though that scene is absolutely great, it's integral. And also, obviously, the guy also makes a decision that nobody would really make that decision anyway,
Yeah.
where he's just like, where he goes, oh, I'm going to let you guys out. You know what I mean? So, and once again, it becomes about movie magic. But you're like, that's one of the moments in the movie where I'm like, the realism of that side of it's gone out the window. Like, I know it's not a realistic movie, but that was one of the only moments or the choices that were made where I was like, oh, okay, like
Yeah.
you're making that moment for the movie, you're not making it for any other
Well,
reason. So, but like I said, the scene itself is fantastic. It's just as soon as you go somewhere with a camera and it's the government or they're like, no, I mean, turn that off. But they don't. So there we go. So very quickly, what are your overall thoughts on the movie? Or obviously, if there's any other things you want to add as well as your overall thoughts.
It's as I said. I think we've kind of touched on them all there. The overall thought is, if you haven't seen the movie, what the fuck are you playing at? Go and watch it. It is, as I said, one of the more intelligent monster movies that you will see. Again, it came out of nowhere. No one was expecting. There was no rumors of, like I said, this being made. It kind of caught everyone off guard at the time. But as you said, it was made in 2008. This movie doesn't look or feel like it was made in 2008. This could be made at any time. The effects are on point. Nothing looks overdone. Nothing looks bad. It's just a really fucking good monster movie. And again, get some popcorn. Like say, chill out on a Saturday or Friday night. It is something that you will enjoy. And it's just a banging movie.
Yeah, I mean, this is another movie where it's very clear, like, where people stand on this movie. Like this show, like, a lot of the times, obviously, there are podcasts out there that do like obviously talk about movies that aren't very good and so on like that. And I've had some of the movies where I'm like it's not as good as what other people think and so on. But this is one of those movies where it's very clear to me. Or to other people that might be watching, listening, as to how highly regarded we feel that this movie is. Because as far as I'm concerned, I would probably say that this is the best. Because found footage and handheld horrors is so difficult to do. And
Yeah.
off the top of my head, I can think of ones that like, and obviously there are more, but films like Deadstream, one of the
Mhm.
most modern handheld horrors, absolutely fantastic, like one of the
Mhm.
best. You've got movies like Wreck, which is obviously considered one of the scariest movies ever
Mhm.
made, which really uses handheld horror and found footage to its benefit.
Yeah.
You've got films like Afflicted and so on.
I think with this
You've
one,
got
it's kind of like a hidden gem in a way that people have heard of it and kind of like, oh, it's just another monster movie. I think if you look at it that way, you're missing the point of the movie. It, it's like give
yeah,
it a chance. Like I said, there's a lot more layers and a lot more to this movie than it had any right to be, type thing as well. This again, it could have been a complete disaster if it wasn't handled the way it was. And again, it's one of those things where it's a fun movie. It keeps you on the edge of your seat. It doesn't let you relax at any time. Um, you still think like the way it plays out that there's going to be a happy ending. Again, spoilers, there's not. But yeah, it's just like as you said, this could have been a complete disaster. It could have been a career killer in a lot of different ways. Like say, if you think of Matt Reeves, like directing this hokey handheld monster film, this in on paper shouldn't have worked the way it did, and again, that just proves that not all films or like movies has to be like set in realism or set like with like or over explaining everything as well. Don't treat the audience like it's stupid. This movie doesn't treat you like you're an idiot, and I think that's why it
yeah,
works as well as it does.
yeah, absolutely. But yeah, so there's a handful of these movies that do it successfully. But I would honestly, and I'm happy to go on paper, that I would probably say as much as basically this is, I would probably say that this is the second best example ever of what a found footage or a handheld horror is, or a handheld movie is. Because obviously, for me, the Blair Witch is always going to be the main one. Because of what that accomplished at the time and what it still feels like it accomplishes when you watch it now to this day, and how it's still a movie that divides people as to whether they like it or they don't. Blair Witch to me is always going to be well, until something comes out
Mm.
that's better, but it is. But Cloverfield to me, I would probably say is the second best example of how you handle a found footage handheld movie and
I'll
deliver
yeah,
everything.
I'll not argue against you, but I'll say it a different way. I think Cloverfield does have found footage better than the Blair Witch, but Blair Witch did it kind of not probably. I don't know if it was the very first movie to use that like premise, but the kind of first big movie that came out that did it the way it did. I think Blair
Well,
Witch
the Blair
did.
Witch was the first mainstream, yeah.
Yeah. So the Blair Witch did the marketing and the campaign for the movie better than anyone that's ever done like before or since. Cloverfield is a better handheld movie. I will go on hand and did the premise better.
There we go. Well, we're opposites on that, but that's fine.
Yeah.
But that's it. But then that takes nothing away from anything
No.
because, yeah, the Cloverfield. I think really basically what I'm saying is that there's a lot of movies out there that can't achieve what this sort of
No.
movie does, and I think what's great about this movie is that, and one of the things that this movie that has done that hasn't been repeated is that this movie did it on a large scale. That,
Mm-hmm.
like I mentioned earlier on, that when I watch this movie, I feel like I'm watching a movie that's a big blockbuster movie rather than watching a handheld movie.
Yeah.
That's how this movie feels to me. And I think that goes to, like, if you can do that, then you know that you're achieving like way beyond so many other movies that have, you know, come after it and been before it as well. But yeah, this is still, like I said, like, you know, this is a fantastic movie. Matt Reeves showed, you know, at the start of his career, what he could do on a format that is so unsuccessful on so many occasions, and then continue to create a very great critical and commercial success. Like I said at the start, this episode or this movie very much is relying on someone who is at the helm creating what this is. Without him, like we've mentioned, it could have been other people who wouldn't have understood what this movie should be and how to carry out what this movie is. So I think Matt Reeves does a fantastic job. The sound is great. The cast is great. It's got the action moments if you love action. It's got great practical effects and special effects. It's got absolutely fantastic horror moments, like the whole scene underneath in the subway with the lights and everything like that is another standout scene. There are moments of everything in this movie, and that's why I think a lot of people do like this movie, and if they do like it, they really like it.
I think
but yeah, so
what's
overall,
quite interesting about the movie as well, it gives you hope while you're watching it, and it takes great joy and enjoyment to take that hope from you. So I think again, it's not a bleak movie, but it's quite interesting how it does that. But yeah, sorry.
Yeah, absolutely, and I think to play to that is that goes once again back to everything of going, when you leave the cinema, you're not thinking about, I feel like shit because all these people are dead, or not the cinema, but when you know, if you watch this movie when you're for the first time at the cinema or at home or whenever, you still left going, oh, that was a really fucking good movie. Yeah. And that's to the credit of the movie itself. Like, you don't go, oh, that's a shame everybody fucking died. You go, what a fucking great movie that was. Yeah. And then it's later on when you're like, oh, actually, yeah, I remember now, everybody died. But it's when you initially watch this movie, and even to this day, when I watched it for prep and everything like that, you're like, what a fantastic, well put together, well thought out movie Cloverfield is. And that's why it's one of those movies that I'm very happy to be able to talk about on the show. Whether people out there think it's a horror is up to them. Like we said, it's all very subjective. But this is horror adjacent, as it is sci-fi adjacent, as it is so many other genre adjacent, that it fits itself into multiple different genres, and there's so many layers to these sort of movies that it's okay to talk about it on a channel like Let's Talk Horror, because it is all subjective, like we said. So as you can tell, we both absolutely bloody love Cloverfield.
Yeah.
So moving on, we have the segment Your First Time. If you know the show, then you know that this is a segment where I reach out to all of you and basically ask you to send me over your first time horror movie memory, and I add it into an episode. This one was sent over to me on Instagram by the Movie Misfit. You can find them at Mike the Movie Misfit, as I said, on Instagram. They sent me. So the first movie was either The Exorcist or an American Werewolf in London. But I will go with The Exorcist, because that one I walked in on when I was playing on when it was playing on TV. I was probably 4 or 5 years old and was walking through the kitchen and walked into the living room, and it was the scene where the head turn had just happened. At 4 or 5 years old, you probably shit your pants. Then the camera close up of Regan's face. The funny thing was, this was the edit for the edited for TV version. So when Regan, I always get it wrong, spoke, I froze. And it cut to commercial. I remember freaking out, and it stuck with me because I have a sister who is 5 years older than me, and at the time resembled Linda Blair. Between seeing my sister all day and picturing Linda Blair was just a weird experience, because it wouldn't leave my brain. But then the night came, and I should say it like this, and then the night came. And I remember being in my little bed, and she kept popping up, and I was convinced she was under my bed, or my sister was going to leap into my bed and stab me. I remember hoping that King Kong would come and save me. And there we go. So that's the end of it. And I mean, I suppose it's quite handy having King Kong on our episode all about essentially a giant monster movie.
Remember,
But
don't
there you
take
go. So thank you
drugs as
to
kids as well.
yeah, that's it. So thank you to Mike the movie misfit. And said you can find him at that on Instagram. I do always ask my guests if they can remember their first time horror movie memory as well. So if you know yours, then go ahead.
Yeah, I had a very open auntie that used to let me watch horror films. So, I think earliest memories was probably like say Nightmare on Elm Street 3, Dream Warriors, Child's Play 3. Going back, like I say, if I've watched like Roald Dahl's Witches, as we mentioned, is absolutely terrifying. So many different types of ones, but yeah, I was obsessed with the Freddy Krueger ones when I was younger. I think, but then there was the whole band ones, and it was trying to get hold of the VHSs of all the video nasties as well. So, good times.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, good times. I always remember. I've said this before as well that I always remember when the Evil Dead was banned and you couldn't get it, but I was at that age when it was slowly becoming unbanned and you could get it. And then the Evil Dead, the original one, was the second horror movie I ever watched. And I remember, like, obviously from that point, I was just like, this is the greatest thing I've ever seen in my life. But I always remember, yeah, like those moments where you couldn't get videos or thing. And as you got older and stuff, and then that sort of went into DVDs in a moment as well, when we all got region free players and you could like go and get everything from America that you couldn't get over here and so on. So what a journey it's been.
Well.
And now you just fucking get everything on Amazon and then that's it. And that's it. So what a world we live in. It's not a bad one when you can get whatever you want for, a couple quid, but it does suck when you like physical media stuff. But yeah, there we go. So there's our first time horror movie memory. As I say, if you want yours read out on the show, also think of it as free promo if you have a fucking YouTube channel or a podcast as well. But just send me a DM on any of our social media platforms, and then I will read it out. I will add it to the list that's constantly getting shorter and shorter because I keep forgetting to ask people. But just send it over as a DM on any social media platform, and I'll write it down, add it to the episode. But Paul, now is your time. As I said at the start, it's your time to promote absolutely bloody. It's the worst part for everyone, but it's now the best time for you to promote everything that you've got with Nerdy Up North.
Yeah, like I said, it's hard to describe what we've become. So we are a community, we are a cult, we are a podcast, we are, like I say, an entertainment, shall we say. We've got everything from, like I say, general nerdy chat. We've got a horror podcast on Monsters Up North. We've got a gaming up north. We've got Women of Nerd Culture. We've got Top Grumps. We've got gigs up north. Literally everything that you can think of. We try to delve our, like say, nerdy fantasy, shall we say. But most thing we do is just basically let you be a nerd, let you enjoy what you love, give you a platform or give you a place to express or basically tell us what you love or why you love something without ridicule, without someone belittling you, or without basically fear of someone looking down on you. You could like love toys, you could like love cooking, you could love music. Literally anything you can be nerdy about, we give you that like chance to either on the Facebook community, which is basically go to Facebook Nerdy Up North community. We've got Instagram, we've got TikTok. Literally, we've got too much stuff. I'll be honest with you. It's just but again, it's we do try and promote like say that community vibe where people can like say make friends. People can like express how they're feeling without in a kind of like a safe environment, and I think that's probably the proudest thing I've done, especially with a lot of things that's happened on social media lately and over the last few months, where, like say, it rears its ugly head, where people kind of get condemned, harassed, abused just for liking certain things, just for being you, and we don't tolerate anything like that. So it's giving people that freedom and that kind of escape to get away from all the shit that's going on in the world, basically. But yeah, I think that describes it the best I can.
There we go. Yeah, and absolutely, and I think what I like about Nerdy Up North, and it is all about like community as well, and that's what I like. Like everything you said, like you do a podcast, so everybody needs to go and check that out. You've got a YouTube channel, so everybody needs to go and subscribe by that.
Mhm.
Subscribe to that. But also on them, you're having great, very honest conversations about
Mhm.
whatever topic it is you're talking about. So you do have that. But what's great as well, and you speak about it more than the content itself, is the community, and that you're
Mhm.
trying to create. You're trying to help people know that there's a community there where people can go. Um, and that is what I really like about everything you do, because that's sort of how I feel with Let's Talk Horror as well. When I
Mhm.
first started this is my therapy, and I've said this from the start of it. But what I've always seen Let's Talk Horror as is a place, a bridge of the gap where people can go if they want to talk about horror, and whether that's with me, whether that's with other people who also know Let Talk Horror. The amount of people that have joined me on my journey who now speak to other people that are on the journey through Let's Talk Horror as well. That's such a great thing. It's so rewarding, and the very amazing positive conversations that I get to have with people all over the world about horror.
Mhm.
It's absolutely fantastic, and that's what I love about everything you're creating as well. Is
And can I
that
say this?
you're
Don't
creating this.
and don't cut this out because I know you can edit stuff, but you should be proud of what you do. Like, say, a lot of people try and do like stuff to the level that you do, like not just like the podcasts, but the way you promote your stuff, the way you condone yourself online as well, the images you use, like literally the design work you do is up there with at such a professional level that you should be very, very proud of what you've done. And again, I know we've had conversations in the past about certain things, but you for what you do and how you do it, like say I've got like people that help me as well do certain aspects. You do this all yourself. It is fucking amazing, mate. So be very proud of what you do, and like say give yourself like I say a lot more credit than you do as well.
See, this is what happens with this show. This show has been about people trying to make me fucking cry. But yeah, it's yeah, you're right. This is what happens. Like I think like Justin did it the other day, like on one of the episodes as well. But I genuinely, I mean, I'll say I won't cut that out, but I hate anybody trying to say anything nice to me because, as you know, and as I've said, I think everything I do is shit. But yeah, that honestly, as although it might not sound like I mean it, and I truly do, yeah, that does mean the world to me. People like yourself, or if anybody says anything positive about what I'm doing, it's difficult for me to take, but also
Mm-hmm.
I try and think of the fact that they're saying it
Yeah.
must mean something,
Mm-hmm.
and so it means the world to me. I don't ever expect it, and yeah, it's tough. You do it all on your own, and but then everything you do as well. Whether it's on your own or with your co-host, it's still tough. The journey we're on all together is not an easy journey. It has its ups and downs, but I really appreciate that, even though it might sound like I don't. But you know that I do. I just find it very difficult to
I
take
know
anybody
I'm one of those
that's
people
not.
that if you say something nice to us, I'll tell you to fuck off. So don't worry.
Yeah, that's how I feel. Obviously, I don't want to tell you to fuck off on here, and I wouldn't do that
Embrace
anyway.
it. Embrace the chaos. Just go, Paul. Fuck
Yeah,
yourself. That's fine.
yeah, that's it. But yeah, no, honestly, like it does, and it's tough doing this. But knowing that it's nice if people were saying that they can see what you're doing in your journey. That's nice, and that means the world. But in regards to my journey, well, I mean, in regards to the Nerdy Up North and everything Paul's doing, make sure you go and enjoy their journey, because it's a great journey that they've been on. It's a great journey they're going to continue to be on. And they're doing great things for the community, as well as putting out really good stuff that you can all enjoy. Like if you enjoyed this conversation about Cloverfield, you'll enjoy all the conversations that they have over on Nerdy Up North. In regards to Let's Talk Horror, obviously I have a Patreon website thing. I don't even know what I've completely gone off the course now because you said something nice about me and I don't know what to do. but we do have a Let's Talk Horror Patreon. As usual, I always do have to thank my creepazoids, as I call them on there, the people that are going above and beyond to help me on my journey. Flicks and Friends podcast, Jamie Burns, aka the Disco Doctor of Death, Rob Miller, and Leighton Collins. They are my Patreons, my creepazoids so far. It means the world to me that they're doing it. I didn't start Patreon to ever think at any point anybody ever would, and the fact that I've got 4 absolute legends doing it so far means the world to me. If anybody wants to know anything more about Patreon, I will put a link, if I'm clever enough to figure it out, in the description on the video, or if you're listening to it on audio, just go to patreon.com, look for Let's Talk Horror channel. It should come up. And if you're watching this, you can sort of see that I've got a t-shirt on. That is merch, because some people in the past have asked about merch, so I've got some merch here. Obviously, I don't make it; it's on a website that charges too much money. But I've taken my margin down to 0, so I make nothing. So it makes it a bit cheaper for anybody else. So I make nothing on them, but it means it makes it a little bit cheaper. I will put a link in the description as well if anybody wants to have a look at merch. Once again, if you're listening to it on audio, I don't know. Figure it out. You'll have to go to our Instagram or something and follow the links. If you go to Instagram or anything, it's got a Linktree website. All of our website stuff is on there as well. But yeah, Let's Talk Horror. We're now a little bit into the year already, and we've got more. Like I said at the start, expect this year more of this. Previous years and everything has been a lot of. The guests are still essentially going to choose the episodes, but when I get those guests, those lists through from the guests, I'm going to be looking at those, and rather than thinking about the things that might get me views, I'm going to be continue to talk about films that might test what horror is. I'm going to be talking about things that may be more involved in regards to the process of filmmaking and cinematography, which has always been a big part of the show. But that's what I'm going to be doing. So expect the next run of episodes to be things that you do not fucking expect, things you don't know, things you don't give a fuck about, and things that you just probably won't give a shit about. But just enjoy it and stay on with me for the ride with Let's Talk Horror. And like I said, go and support everything that Nerdy Up North does. But Paul, thank you so much once again for coming on the show. I love having you on the show, and now it feels like a running thing for us has to be that it's either a found footage handheld horror movie, doesn't it?
Oh no, I don't think there's many other ones I would like to watch.
Yeah, yeah, fair enough. Yeah, it's that's the thing. It's a subgenre that is worth delving into because you can find the gems, but also you've got to be ready to go through the absolute monstrosity and shit of absolute anything. I mean, just start on Tubi and work your way through the absolute shit, and then you might find a good one. But that's what's interesting about the subgenre, and that's what's so interesting that you get a movie from 2008 called Cloverfield that did it at the highest caliber, that's still not really been replicated as much to the day. So thank you once again to Paul for coming on the Let's Talk Horror channel, and to everybody else out there, just keep trucking with me. I don't even know what I'm saying now because I'm still thrown off by somebody saying something nice about me. But I'm just going to end it. So until next time, stay creepy, fuckers.
Bye.